Paolo,
Yes.
you just tell me which questions you would want me to answer. I won't jump
you
in,
say,
okay?
or I will tell you, or you have the initiative. Okay. Okay. No, brief introduction. Oh my goodness, this light is terrible.
If there is something in addition I'd like to say, I will take the floor, but otherwise I'll wait for you to
Okay.
instruct me.
Because the photos with dark shade is awful. Dark shade.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
right.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay. Mr. Pinheiro, are you ready?
Yes?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Margaret Nowicki from the UN Department of Public Information, and we're pleased to have with us today the members of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Syria, Mr. Paolo Pinheiro, the chairperson, Ms. Yakin Erturk, and Ms. Karen Koenig Abu Zaid. They were appointed by the President of the Human Rights Council last September to investigate all alleged violations of international human rights law in Syria since March 2011, to establish the facts and circumstances of the crimes perpetrated, and where possible, to identify those responsible. They have presented 2 reports to the Human Rights Council, one in December and one in March. Mr. Pinheiro is a research coordinator at the Center for the Study of Violence and a retired professor of political science at the University of São Paulo. He served as UN Special Rapporteur on Burundi and also on Myanmar, and also chaired the Independent Special Commission of Inquiry on Timor-Leste. Ms. Erturk has held numerous international positions, including UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Director of the UN Division for the Advancement of Women. She also served as Professor of Sociology and head of the Gender and Women's Studies program at the Middle East Technical University in Ankara, Turkey. Ms. Abu Zaid is former Commissioner General of the UN Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, where she oversaw programs in the occupied Palestinian territory. Before that, she worked for the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees for 19 years, as well as head of office in Sierra Leone and Bosnia. We'll begin by hearing brief remarks from the chairperson of the commission, Mr. Pinheiro, and then all 3 panelists will be available to take your questions. This press conference will last for 45 minutes until 11:45. Mr. Pinheiro, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My task will be easy because our colleague has already indicated what is our mandate. I will not repeat that. Then we have presented 2 reports. Our work is, as Yakin says, a victim center. The centrality of victims is the main preoccupation of the report. And then we address all the communities in Syria, not only the opposition, but the people who are support the government or have not expressed any position. That is, we deal with all the effects of the unrest in all the civilian population. Then the 2 reports, they deal with gross human rights violations practiced by the armed security forces and also some militia connected to the government forces, and by the armed opposition, the armed groups, and the Free Syrian Army. I think that we were the first to call attention that the non-state armed groups are supposed to abide to human rights international law. And then in our second report, we have described some of those violations committed by the armed opposition. We also try to give an honest picture of the socioeconomic situation, the sufferings of the population. We were able to present a good description of the chain of command of the armed forces and also of the difficulties and the fragile situation of the the armed opposition, indicating that even two are parties of armed confrontations. There is no equivalence between the two parties. There is an enormous disparity, and this is, I think, that's very important to take in consideration in any analysis that we'll make about the situation and the ways to overcome the terrible situation where the Syrian people are facing at this moment. Then the first component, the first track of the report is human rights accountability. We dealt with the responsibility of individuals in the government that we find having committed gross human rights violations and also crimes against humanity. The second track is, of course, the humanitarian, all the challenges to assist the population. As Karim Abu Zaid, my colleague, has repeated several times this week here, there is not an emptiness of humanitarian assistance inside Syria. So with this extraordinary proposals of humanitarian corridors and these ideas forget that the UN, many UN agencies are there working very hard, for instance, to assist 1 million of Iraqi refugees and 450,000 Palestine. Then I think in the questions, answering the questions, Karen will be able to come on board on this topic. The last track is the political track, that is, but not in terms that we are, in our mandate, we are proposing political solutions, but what interests us in the debate about these solutions is how better to protect the rights of the Syrian people. And then in the conclusions, we have said that further militarization will contribute to escalation to full-fledged civil war. And full-fledged civil war, it will be much more difficult to find any exit for this situation. We also think that arming the armed groups will be also very problematic. And then we have concluded our second report saying that what is necessary, and we see with the only solution, is a negotiated settlement. With inclusive dialogue among all parties, the government and all parts of the opposition. And we are very happy that 1 month after the publication of our report, we have found the same language in the 6 points of UN and Arab League envoy Kofi Annan, and at the presidential statement published 2 days ago?
Day before yesterday.
Yeah, before yesterday. And then we are very glad, because this confirms that we were in the right direction, concluding as we did our second report. I'll stop with these words, and I invite you, if you have any comments or questions, my colleagues and I will be delighted to try to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pinheiro. We'll begin. Please introduce yourself when posing your question.
My name is from Al Arabiya News Channel, and on behalf of the members of ANCAN Executive Committee, we welcome you and thank you very much for this press conference. We understand today that in Geneva you have been extended, your mandate has been extended to September. What do you intend to do from now till September? Are there different methods you're going to follow? What is different, and what do you hope to achieve by the end of when you submit your report in September? And if there are different methods as well you're going to follow. Secondly, concerning the mechanism that you talk about, has been talked about in the presidential statement, independent mechanism to monitor the ceasefire and to ensure that forces are withdrawn from cities in Syria, whether it's government or opposition. My question is to you, ladies and gentlemen, is what's your understanding of withdrawal of forces? I mean, most of the people fighting in these cities are from these cities. Where do you expect them to withdraw to? And if you can shed some light on that for us, please. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to meet your colleagues of the press today. Again, we are waiting for this resolution because as we are not sure that this will happen, this extension of the mandate, we don't have yet specific plans. But I think that we'll continue to do what we are doing, and I think that we are doing well in terms of documenting as far as we can. We hope always to have access to Syria, but the fact that we don't have access to Syria doesn't mean that we don't have access, don't have information from and inside Syria. Then I think that we'll continue to collect this information that will feed our data bank. We'll continue collecting information in the neighboring countries is one way to do that. Meeting normal common Syrians or people from the opposition or defectors, or being in contact regularly with the representatives of the Syrian government, as we are doing since January, and also with all the currents of the opposition. We don't know, that is, we don't have many details. Perhaps you'd like to be more visible in terms of our findings, not to wait until June, but as the situation is so serious, and as there is a mission of Kofi Annan, I think perhaps it would be useful that we don't expect just the update to June to share with the UN and the NGOs and all the parties some of our comments on fight. But this is just a possibility. The second question. Okay, I understand now. Yes, this idea of the armed groups, they have to turn out the mobile. This idea that the armed groups, they have to disappear. They have to go where? To the sea, or I don't know, to other countries. Yes, but the basis of this is because the government thinks that they are all external combatants that are invading Syria and doing this armed confrontation. As you said, most of these armed groups are common citizens that are protecting the population. Having said that, let's not be innocent, because there is no innocence in all this game. There are we are very cautious about that. But of course, are friendly combatants perhaps present in Syria that complicates all this effort, in terms that are not only the visible armed groups, but perhaps there are other individuals that are helping also the opposition.
Can I just add something?
Yeah.
I'd just like to add something to this. Of course, your question is a very relevant one. From the perspective of this Commission's findings, we would interpret withdrawal of forces to mean state forces to withdraw from all populated areas, which does not mean that the non-state armed groups will not be addressed, but it's the withdrawal of state forces. I think this is how we interpret it. And what will be the mechanisms to ensure this, etc.? I think this is something we would also have to wait and see, because this is not within our mandate. It is the Security Council decision. How they interpret their own decision and how they will enforce it is something for us to see.
If I may follow, do you foresee that the forces within the towns, the armed forces, the civilians, call them what you may, they have to put their arms aside as well.
Of course.
Of course, this has to be addressed, but withdrawal directly means withdrawal of state forces.
Mr. Pinheiro, a question. Your report came out a while ago, and obviously it was being written a while ago. Have you seen any significant changes in the situation in Syria on the ground since your report was written, and how would you describe the situation today?
Yeah, no, I just want to say that's not so much while ago. It was 1 month ago, and we did an update on 12 March. But we have very fresh, recent information that our investigators are covering in the area, and I will ask my two colleagues to come on board and to briefly give some news.
Yes, and it also relates to your first question, too, Talal, on the changes and the differences that might come with the coming mandate, is the new numbers of refugees that are coming out with different characteristics. We were always interested in the small number of refugees before that seemed often to be coming as individuals or families joining people who were already working in neighboring countries. But we do have, as has just been mentioned, our investigators are in the field now in the neighboring countries and giving us very much higher numbers. We're getting those numbers also from UNHCR, so that we've heard that registered with UNHCR in Lebanon are 15,000 refugees. This is quite a lot more than has been admitted before. The neighboring countries are now turning from calling these people guests to actually asking for help from UNHCR to register these people. In Turkey now we have a number of 16,000 from yesterday. And again, as I say, these are now people coming in great numbers, larger numbers, whole neighborhoods, whole so on. So these are not just people coming who are thinking about coming and going, but this is about a new kind of refugee that needs to be looked at differently and to find out why they're coming and what their anticipations are of the future. But Yakin has a number of information inside.
I'll just follow up on what Karen has said. Of course, with new coming refugees, we are able to learn trends that were not accessible to us previously. For example, some of the initial feedback we're getting from our investigators on the field indicate that unrest in areas outside of the known areas, such as Aleppo, are also becoming significant. For example, the situation of Aleppo University and the unrest that have been going on there. The university campus has been closed for 6 months. You know, we did not have direct information on these except what we read in the media, but now people with that kind of information are coming out and giving us. Furthermore, another aspect of Aleppo, which very much coincides with our first report, is the medical sector, the hospitals, where we reported in our first report that patients were being further tortured and killed in medical centers. And here, new testimonies reveal that doctors have been instructed to make unconscious the patients during the Arab League visit, for example. And that similar incidents that we described in the first report are taking place in the Aleppo hospital. But one other factor which may be of concern, I don't want to get into all the new trends that are coming to us because we need to really follow them up further, but there have been new high-ranking defections. As you may know, there's a camp, particularly in southern Turkey, where the leadership, quote-unquote, Colonel Riyad al-Assad is staying. There was another colonel that had joined him a few weeks ago, al-Sheikh. But now we have been told that a number of high-ranking officers have come. This is interesting. However, it doesn't tell us that there is an overall defection which will affect the balances of power. But these are new trends that we are becoming aware of that need to be further watched.
Are you increasing the number of investigators? You have 6 now, I think.
Whatever the requirement will be, I think it will. The office will provide the necessary support. Okay, thank you.
Just a footnote. that is, I don't think Joachim mentioned that in the last week our colleagues were able to make 70 interviews. And there is something different that I like just to stress, that it seems to our colleagues that less people interviewed were victims of the excessive use of force during the quelling of protests, while more and more people appear to be killed or injured in the context of military operations against entire village. I think this is a very new.
Because we couldn't hear what you said.
Okay, okay, sorry. No, I have had that in the last week. Our colleagues were able to make 70 interviews, and there is a new trend that they were trying to describe. That in comparison with the previous findings in the two reports, less people interviewed now were victims of the excessive use of force by state actors during the repression, the quelling of protests, while more and more people appear to be killed or injured in the context of military operations against entire villages. For instance, such attacks seem to be motivated by either the pursuit of anti-government armed groups or the decision to punish collectively. And in the report, we dare to mention this collective punishment, to punish collectively the population of a village. In the later case, sometimes the population was warned that the village would be shelled if the people will not surrender themselves. Then we will try to develop that, but this is a new trend. You spoke about the defections of the.
Yes,
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks very much. My name is Jin Oika for NHK Japanese Public TV. I have 3 quick questions, and the first one is.
We don't have that much time.
So the first one is what is the biggest concern as of now? The second is could you get access into Syria? The third is how do you evaluate the PRST of Security Council? So PRST will give you good thing in terms of the implementing your mission. Thanks.
Very quickly, the first question. Of course, the main priority is the protection of the civilians, the population that is paying the price of this violence. Not only the militants, but the common people being submitted, for instance, to indiscriminate bombardment. The second question was? Access to Syria. Access to Syria. No, we have, and lamentably, we have no access to Syria. But this is not the first report that we are making that you don't have access to countries. For 7 years, I had not, as a special rapporteur in the inter-American system, I was a rapporteur on Venezuela, and President Chavez didn't allow me to enter 7 years, but I produced some good reports. And the third question. Security Council decision. Excellent. We are very happy with the presidential statement, and I think that is very important that all the P5 members and all the members of the Security Council are on board. And I think that this is the most important game in town, the mission of Kofi Annan.
But do you think with the PRST, do you think can you enter into Syria? So
I will be delighted to, and I hope that our friends in the Security Council will try to convince the Syrian government that is in its own interest that we can be also in Syria.
Let me turn to this side of the yes. Please introduce
yourself. This is
yourself.
Kahraman Haliselik with Turkish Radio Television. Did you ask the Security Council yesterday to provide you with access to Syria? I mean, are you asking the Security Council, or are you asking the other UN bodies, the humanitarian mission, Madame Valerie Amos's mission? I mean, are you trying to at least affiliate yourself with some of these missions so you can go in, or you don't think it's really important to go in, you can produce reports without going in as well?
No, that is, the mic is okay? Yeah. We don't have any intention to be affiliated with any other mission. We recognize the specificity of each track, the specificity of the Kofi Annan mission, and we have our mission. And what we do is to inform the other players about, and we are informed by them. Yes, we have asked the member states to support our requests to have access to Syria.
Matthew Lee, Intercity Press. Amnesty International put out a press release today saying that any monitoring mechanism that the joint UN Arab League mission were to set up should definitely include human rights monitoring, which some UN peacekeeping missions recently have not included. So I wanted to get your thought on that. The spokesman for Kofi Annan has said that he's considering all options for the monitoring mechanism, but that I wanted to just get sort of very specifically whether you think human rights should be a part. And Mr. Pinheiro, can you compare what you've found about Syria in the course of this mission with what you found about Myanmar when you covered that in terms of, I've heard many people say this is the worst or the highest death count, or, I mean, it's not a question of numbers, but how would you compare this to what you found when you used to cover Myanmar from outside of the border?
The second, I don't compare with any other country. Only I just think about Syria. And I don't think that is helpful to compare what is in a sort of classification or championship of what is worse. We don't think this is useful. Yes, we always think that as a position of principle that human rights component is very important to be present in any mission. But I will not say anything specifically concerning the mission of the Special Envoy of the UN and the Arab League. I haven't read the statement, and then we don't have any special requests concerning his mission. The only thing that we are happy that is with the exchange of information.
I'd just like to add to that. If you look at our second report, we have a specific recommendation arguing that every mission to Syria should have a human rights component. So definitely, we support that idea.
I'm wondering what your reaction is. Oh, I'm sorry. Kristen Salumi from Al Jazeera English. I'm wondering what your reaction is to the opposition's reaction to the Security Council statement last week. We know that there's been some response to Kofi Annan from the government. We haven't heard details of that, but the opposition has been pretty clear that they weren't satisfied with that and that they haven't shown any indication to lay down their arms. What would your response be?
That is, we don't like to give lessons to opposition so brave, so courageous that are confronting this situation for 1 year. But I hope that the Syrian National Council and other currents of the opposition will come on board in supporting the Kofi Annan mission. But it's not our role to criticize or to assess the positions of the opposition. The only thing that I hope that the opposition in Syria will follow the member states of the Security Council that now have a united position concerning the Kofi Annan mission. I hope that the Syrian opposition will also become unified in supporting this strategy.
May I just sorry, go ahead.
We also think that these things should be seen as a first step. I don't think any of them, people who are even producing these statements, say that this is enough. It isn't, but it will go further after it's accepted, as we say, by both sides. So that you don't have two sides supporting two different parts of what's going on in Syria today, the government and the opposition. It's very important.
I'd just like to add to that we feel the opposition, whether the civilian or the military component, both have responsibility as well, not only in terms of international law, but to their own people. And we would very much like to see the opposition articulate a convincing vision of Syria for the future, which gives some relief to those who are skeptical in the country, minorities particularly. We haven't yet heard what the Syrian opposition foresees for Syria's future. So they have an obligation to make this a clear statement so that people know what to expect, and as well as the international community to know what is at stake here.
Just very quick follow-up. The death toll that has been coming out from the UN is over 8,000. Do you think that's accurate anymore, or no? Yes, yes.
Thank you. Good morning. Hank Flynn, Press TV. Please do correct me if I stray. You said in your first report it mainly focused on humanitarian rights abuses. Human rights, pardon me, by Syrian governmental forces. I wondered when you're compiling this report, is that wrong?
No,
I just wondered if you're also compiling data on opposition force abuses as well.
Sure.
Okay. And secondly, with no access, I'm sorry.
It's very difficult to collect information on those because the people against which those are being affected are inside the country, and we aren't, without the access, we can't.
But it is addressed in the report.
Okay, and just to back up on what you're saying, without the access, how can you be so sure of not being misinformed?
First, we are not particularly dumb, and we have a great, we have a lot of experience in dealing with, doing reports about countries where we don't have access. But I'll let my colleague Yakin to explain that.
Thank you. Well, we have a very well-developed methodology where our criteria of acceptable evidence is clearly spelled out. So I think you would need to look at our first and second report. So we do not take any information that comes to us. We have had many, many allegations of human rights violations, which the media would have jumped at, I think, very sensationalized. But we never went for that kind of speculative reporting. We're a human rights commission, and we deal with evidence that we can substantiate firsthand. At least two witness testimonies corroborated with other evidence such as aerial photographs, medical reports, etc., etc. This is all spelled out in our report. So where we have a question mark, we refrain from dealing with that issue. That may be dealt with later if evidence arises.
We have not yet our own satellite as George Clooney, but we use a lot of satellite information.
There have been reports about refugees or people leaving the country for Turkey and Lebanon and being fired on. Did you get any substantiation on that? Because that was quite recent.
We don't have any specific information for that. We haven't had a report back on that. No. One of the things that concerns us is the mining of the borders to not allow the refugees out, and there seems to be quite an effort on the part of the government not to let people out. Certainly no one allowed out legally. One of the things they've started to do is if people have a new passport, they don't allow them to get a stamp to go out, even for working or other sorts of things. So there certainly is an attempt to prevent people from going out, but not further information on that.
Well, actually, there have been some cases that we have interviewed, people who had been injured while trying to come across and are being treated in hospitals in the neighboring countries, but it's not something that we gave a large space to in our report.
Just to say, a number of these defectors that we've heard about, especially these high-level defectors, are escorting people out. And if you've read some of the reports of how people get out, it's quite harrowing. And then they come out and bring the people out and then go back in. So it's another interesting phenomenon that's occurring.
Do you have evidence of money?
No.
Mercedes Gallego with the Spanish newspaper El Correo and the rest of Posento Media Group. I would like to have more information on what Mrs. Erkut said earlier about how patients were left unconscious during the visit of inspectors. I haven't heard that before, although there has been a lot of reports in the media about torture in the hospitals. Could you give me more information about that part?
Well, I wouldn't be able to give you more information at this point, but I think this will be something that the Commission will be reporting on in the future, because this is based on the preliminary information our investigators are reporting back to us, so that we do have some new trends to report to you at this point. But I think I would not want to speculate at this point, but our investigators will be looking into these further.
And how the doctors are cooperating in this
Well, this is another matter, and I think we did report on this in our report. Some doctors, of course, themselves have been target of mistreatment, torture, because they did not comply, and there are those who do. So, there is no one-sided view on this, I think.
Do you have any more information about how the inspector have been misled during their visits?
No, we don't. This is just a very preliminary information we received. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
How many investigators do you have? I'm sorry, I'm from Turkish Anatolian News Agency. I would like to ask specifically to Ms. Ertürk, if you excuse me, how many inspectors do you have on the scene in the refugee camps in Turkey? And are you in regular contact with these people and also with the refugees? And about the human rights violations by the opposition side, how do you get information about that? Please, thank you.
Well, with regard to your first question, we have interviewed 369 individuals in the two phases of our investigation, and Mr. Pinero said 70 more have recently been interviewed. So we've had a different number of investigators dispatched to the different areas, and we ourselves have also gone and were part of the, I went to Hatay and to Jordan, and my colleagues went to other neighboring areas. Ms. Abu Zaid joined me. We were together in Hatay. So it would be difficult to say how many investigators altogether, but there have been different dispatches of people going and coming back. But we do maintain our contacts with the people that we have previously interviewed, because we have fluent native Arabic speakers on our investigative team. So there is a constant relationship and openness to receiving information, even if we are not physically present there. And your second question was? I forgot.
Human rights.
Oh, opposition. Well, if you look at our second report, and as Ms. Abu Zaid just said a few minutes ago, of course, our criteria of first-hand testimony was very difficult to apply to documenting the opposition forces, but we relied mainly on consistent secondary information. Again, we didn't take anything that was in the media or other information, but we tried to weed out patterns that seem to come out and supported by various sources.
And just to complete it, we have also integrated in the second report all the numbers provided by the government concerning the deaths, the killings of members of their armed and security force. Everything that the government submitted to us, it is in the second report. Of course, we have told the representatives that if we have access to Syria, we'd like very much to meet the families of the wounded soldiers, the families of those killed, and we are open to any data that the government would like to supply to us.
For Ms. Ertürk, you said earlier on there are a growing number of defectors. Can you give us a more precise number of how many you know of and what ranks they are, and what are they doing now? Are they joining the opposition groups?
It's very difficult to answer this question given our access to information, but our colleagues have just reported back to us that since our second report, 4 brigadier generals have defected.
7 defected, 4 they interviewed.
And of course others before. But the reason why this is important because of indicating that high-level defections are increasing, not in a very large number, but previously I think the main defections were from the enlisted men, and less so from a higher-ranking post of the security and army. So, but as far as numbers goes, we don't know, because we know there are some in the camps in the neighboring countries, but many of them remain in the country. As Ms. Abu Zaid just said, some of them come to accompany civilians and go back. Some come to discuss with the so-called leadership in Hatay on issues. So there's a lot of going and coming, but the actual numbers are very speculative.
Follow up. You said as well that these doctors were making people unconscious when the Arab League was visiting. You mean when the Arab League monitor missions were going to the hospitals?
This was a testimony that we received.
Right.
That
when
needs.
the Arab League monitors went to those cities.
This is the testimony. Yes.
Okay.
Just to be cautious about this number, because the fact is that 1 year after the beginning of the unrest, the chain of command, is, particularly in the highest level, is almost intact for several reasons, for loyalty, for fear concerning their families. But the fact is that after 1 year, there was no substantial defection in the highest ranks. Then this is something new that we received yesterday.
Yes, please.
Very quickly, my question. This is Christy Colessa, Al Arabiya. My question is about accountability. This is now the second report. You'll have an oral report in June, and then finally before the end of the mandate in September. To what end is all of this evidence that you're collecting? Where would you like to see it go? And if you could comment at all about a possible referral eventually to the International Criminal Court.
You want me to answer?
Yeah, you.
Okay. I'll take the heat on this one. We have not considered referral to ICC for various reasons, and we explain in our second report that according to international law, the primary responsibility falls on the national state. Obviously, the Syrian state mechanisms and given the impunity in which these violations are taking place, there's a serious question mark as to whether there is a capacity to investigate. So we have made number of recommendations where structural reforms are needed, as well as adoption of new legal provisions, such as adoption of the principles of the Rome Statute into national laws, because at the moment Syria is neither a party to the Rome Statute, nor do they have such crimes against humanity in their national law. So there is need for considerable change and restructuring, which the international community should be ready to support Syria before the national mechanisms can undertake such a challenging task. But our confidential list is entrusted as in a sealed envelope, which is deposited with the High Commissioner, which she has no access to, and she has no decision to dispose as she likes, because we have made clear that it can only be provided when there is a competent authority, independent mechanisms for investigation, respect for confidentiality, and witness protection. So we spelled out the conditions under which this list can be made available. In many inquiry commissions, this kind of procedure is followed to provide input into a formal investigation. So the reason why we didn't make these names public is that we're not a court, and these are names which remain, these people remain innocent until they are actually tried in a competent court. So we hope that our work will feed into a formal investigation. Of course, this would not rule out ICC eventually, but this is not something we have promoted.
If I may just follow up quickly, but you met with the Security Council. The Security Council has the power to refer this to the ICC. Did you bring this up? Did you recommend? Did you discuss this at all?
No. And it's very important to complete that there is no copy, hard copy or electronic copy of this list. We don't have copies. Nobody has copies. We have already forgot who are in this list.
If the Security Council wants it, you make it available, no?
Not for Security Council, but to competent courts. Independent.
It is in article in paragraph 87 of the second report. The conditions under which the High Commissioner would be able to supply a list that she doesn't know what names or units are in the list.
I'm sorry, we're past time. Just this one last question, because you've had your hand up for a while.
Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, you sort of touched on it earlier. I was just wondering, if, I'm hoping that you can just give an update on the number of refugees. You said 16,000 in Turkey, and I was just looking for an update. And as well, if you could just go into a little more detail about this new trend that you're noticing, where it's not individuals or families coming across, but entire villages and towns.
Just to more or less repeat what we said earlier, so the numbers that we have are, 15,000 now registered in Lebanon, where UNHCR has said that, in fact, they think there are many more who are not registering for various reasons, fear of being identified and so on. And anyway, they also have many connections in the country, as was happening before with the individuals. The same in Jordan, without having numbers, but knowing that there are more than the few thousands that we saw there before. Still looking for those numbers too. But I think we've described it twice now that, in the early days they were coming and going, they were joining families who were working in these countries. Now, because of what's happening with the battles in the whole cities being emptied, people are coming out as whole groups and in greater numbers as whole villages and so on. It's also, that's something that's produced that I would like to say is that the number of the IDPs, the internally displaced persons inside Syria, is something we want to explore a little more, as well as we can from outside, because now those numbers are around 200,000, we understand. So add those to the detainees, 18,000 or more, and all the people who are disappeared that we don't know whether they're in jail or out of jail or alive or dead. These are all things that we want to look at as well.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank our commission members for being with us today.
Thank
you all for coming.
Thank you.
Very much.
Great. Now let's run.